Good morning and welcome to the final episode of the virtual Big Day in Queensland. My name is Shazin Sohani, an intern at the ACS Foundation, and I will be your virtual Big Day in Queensland co-host for today. I'd like to introduce Matthew Jorgensen from the Australian Computer Society to officially open this event and talk about the Gateway to Industry Schools program.
Thank you, Shazin. Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Jorgensen. I'm the project manager for the ICT Gateway to Industry Schools program here in Queensland. I work for the Australian Computer Society. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands upon which we all meet today, and for me that's the Bundjalung people. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. The ICT Gateway program connects schools, students and teachers with technology professionals in order to provide invaluable industry experience. By connecting with the people and organisations that are actually working within the industry, students can understand the types of roles that exist in a modern economy. We want to help teachers become more confident teaching with and about technology, increase the number of students studying tech subjects in school, TAFE and uni, and build a larger pool of employees for our Queensland and Australian tech companies to hire. We are very happy to be part of the ACS Foundation's virtual Big Day In, and we thank the Foundation for providing these virtual Big Day In sessions featuring innovative Queensland-based ICT representatives. Thank you also to our wonderful presenters today. The stories you will hear will hopefully inspire you to consider a career in technology. I'd like to acknowledge the Queensland Government for the past, present and future support of this Gateway to Industry Schools program. Back to you, Shazin.
The Big Day In is an IT careers conference in an online format this year aimed at giving you an insight into where a career in technology can take you. Today, we'll be hearing from two experienced technologists, Heinrich Viljoen, the head of IT governance and cybersecurity at Youi Insurance, as well as Shazin Sohani from Wespac Cybersecurity Division. Remember, this virtual event is interactive, so you can always ask questions of either presenter during their presentations, no matter how trivial you think they are. Just hit the Ask a Question button on the bottom right, type something up, and we'll take care of the rest. Our first presenter for today is Heinrich Viljoen. Heinrich is the head of IT governance and cybersecurity at Youi Insurance. He was previously the director of cybersecurity and architecture at Deloitte Australia. He has worked in cybersecurity for the past 14 years. When he's not working to defend against cyber threats, he spends time tinkering with tech gadgets or relaxing with his partner and 2 kids. So please join me in welcoming our first presenter for today, Heinrich Viljoen from Youi Insurance, with Why is Cybersecurity a Thing?
Thanks for that kind introduction, Shazin. I appreciate that. And also Matthew. It's great to be part of this excellent initiative. Thank you also for everyone who's joining us on the call today and in this presentation. So we often hear about cybersecurity on the news, read about it in social media. We even have weeks like these that Ask Cyber are bringing to us. And so I thought it would be great to just take a step back and just unpack what cybersecurity is and why it's a thing. So what we'll cover today is firstly, what is a cyber attack? And then also who are responsible for cyber attacks. Then we'll also take a look at what does a cyber attack look like from various perspectives. And I'd like to also take you through some example public data breaches or ransomware incidents, as this is typically what we read about in the news or on social media. And lastly, when we defend against cyber attacks, what do the members of the cybersecurity team look like? So let's first start with what a cyber attack is. So very briefly, it's an attack launched from one or more computers against another computer. Now, the animation that you see on the screen certainly is animated, but it's not as far from the truth as you might think. So typically it involves an attacker, the bad person, wanting to take control of another computer. And the way that they typically do that is to infect the other computer with malware or malicious code. Once they've done that, the other computer is essentially theirs and they can execute commands on that computer as much as they want. Now, there are two main types of cyber attacks. those that target the opposite computer's data. And typically that's when you read about data breaches, large chunks of sensitive information like customer names and phone numbers and email addresses breached and available on the internet. And then the second type of attack, which is basically targeted at knocking the other computer offline. And this is where we see ransomware attacks, where a company's infrastructure or technology may become completely unavailable as a result of a cyber attack. We'll unpack those two types of attacks a bit later on, and I'll take you through some real-world examples of those. Okay. So, who are responsible for cyber attacks? Now, this question is not only an interesting one to understand, but it's also critical for cybersecurity experts and cyber teams to understand who is attacking them. So for the organizations that I've worked with, we've gone through extensive exercises to really understand what do our cyber adversaries or the bad guys that want to attack us look like? Why do they want to do this? And I guess the reason for this is illustrated quite nicely in this quote. It's from Sun Tzu, who was a general in the Chinese army around about 500 BC, and he wrote now a classic strategy book called The Art of War. And the quote says, "If you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles." Now, this is a very appealing quote, mostly because many of, I guess, the people who work in cyber like that sort of thing and like war strategy and trying to stay one step ahead. But if we do fully understand our adversaries and the people who we're defending against, then that's when we're most effective at defending against cyber threats. So now I'd like to take you through a few examples of cyber adversaries. You'll notice we don't just call them bad guys. Adversary sounds cooler, so I'll stick with that term for today. The first type of adversary we have is known as a script kiddie. This is not always someone who is still a kid, can be. It can be someone who's 80 years old and has just found cybersecurity or hacking as a hobby for the first time. Now, the main reason why script kiddies or skiddies hack and or attack organizations and others is for fun or for fame. So to prove that they can hack or they just find it intriguing. They typically focus on easy targets, so unlikely to hack a bank, for example, more likely to hack a hotel or a neighbor's Wi-Fi. And then the tools they use are typically pre-developed hacking tools that are downloaded from somewhere. They don't create their own hacking tools like some other more, I guess, technical groups would do. It's very important to note that even though this, I say that they do this for fun and they focus on easy targets, performing any sort of hack or any sort of a computer attack on another computer without their consent is illegal in most countries, and therefore it is very much a bad idea. Probably well illustrated in the example of a skiddy who was arrested in 2015 after they attacked the internet service provider TalkTalk in the UK. So they used a very rudimentary technique to get into TalkTalk's systems, and then they managed to download a really large chunk of sensitive information from their servers. And but they were very quickly apprehended by the federal police in the UK. So it's a terrible idea to actually perform this attack. The second type of cyber adversary is known as hacktivists. Now, these hacktivists are typically hackers for social justice and see themselves as social justice warriors looking out for the little people. Their targets are typically anyone who don't align with their views. So it can be small organizations, it can be individuals. And then they also commonly focus on, I'd say, the exploitable vulnerabilities. So essentially, they also aren't highly technical, and they don't have a lot of money backing them, but they do look for easy ways to achieve their goal. An example of a hacktivist attack. So in 2011, the hacktivist collective called Anonymous, they hacked the Egyptian government in an operation called Operation Egypt, where they brought down all the government websites and said they'll only bring them back up if the president at that time, Hosni Mubarak, resigns. So eventually, I'm not sure whether it was as a result of the hacktivist attack, but that did eventually happen. And so that's obviously a very politically motivated hacktivist attack on a nation state. Egypt in this case. Another example of a hacktivist attack was when Fox.com was hacked. So a large number of their sensitive information was breached. And the reason behind this attack was apparently because one of the presenters on Fox.com called a rapper known as Common vile on air. And that was the reason why they were hacked. So very much not a politically driven attack. And hacktivists tend to either be really politically motivated, or it just can be as simple as offending them because they badmouth their favorite rapper on air. Malicious insiders. These are people who work inside organizations. So this can be Jennifer from accounting, who plugs a flash drive into a computer and copies a bunch of sensitive information, maybe the financial reports, to a flash drive because she is going to a new company and she wants to use that there. So insider threats are also real. And then lastly, cybercrime syndicates. Now, these are, as may be obvious, fairly large organizations. They're typically structured as a real company or real organization, and they're after money. The reason why they hack organizations is because they want to make money. So that's why their targets typically are financial services or any larger organizations that are able to pay them. And they also use very advanced hacking techniques because they are well funded. So that's a quick summary of a few cyber adversaries. There are a few others as well, but I thought I'd cover those for today. So what does a cyber attack actually look like? That very much depends on who you are. So the map that you are looking at now, I took this recording a couple of weeks ago as I was preparing for this presentation. And it essentially shows in real time some cyber attacks that are occurring as I said, in real time. So these are, this was captured by a security platform called Checkpoint. And essentially what this does is it shows that there are attacks basically happening at any given moment in the world. So this is a bit of a Hollywood view of what cyber looks like, I guess. Cyber attacks, this particular view is often referred to as a pew-pew map by cyber experts and not really something we rely on. But still, it illustrates that cyber attacks do actually happen relatively frequently. Now, if we want to talk about what cyber attacks look like, to us as end users, to normal people, typically it will look like this. So here we have a normal email that one can receive, and cyber adversaries often like to package the start of their attacks in phishing emails, where they ask the end user to click on a malicious link. Apologies. And this is what the attack could look like for a normal end user. Now, for the attacker on the other side of the attack, it may look like this. So this is a tool called Metasploit, which is often used for hacking. And this is ask the end user to click on a malicious link. Probably there's some feedback on the line, but yeah, I'm sure that'll be sorted now. Okay, so this is a real attack example, and this is what it may look like for the hacker, or it may look like this. So this is an example of a control panel for a piece of malware that was used in an attack in 2008. Now this was developed by a person in France called Jean-Pierre Lesueur. He was 22 years old at the time, where he developed this software that he could install on other machines and then remote control them. So you could do things like hide the clock or hide the person's icons. At that point, there was still CD drives, so you can open the CD-ROM and close it for them. And obviously this was weird, but you could also do things like capture keystrokes, so you could see what the person was typing. Or you could do things like running script or running code on that remote machine, so that the machine could essentially do whatever you wanted to do. So Jean-Pierre developed this essentially for fun, but this was eventually used by within the Syrian civil war to monitor what specific parties in the war were doing. And at that point, Lesueur stepped away from it and said, listen, this is not being used for things that I didn't intend it to be used for, and he stepped away from it. But this is as simple as an attacker's console could look like to control an attack. Now, if you're in the cyber defense team, then an attack may look like, well, typically one of these. As you can see, the the pew pew map there on the bottom right with the real-time threats. Probably the most realistic view of what we see as cyber defenders every day is that screen in the center, the top center, where essentially we look at large numbers of data to try and identify when a cyber attack is happening. So an example of what we may be looking for is if we have a website for our company that is available, exposed to the internet, where our customers can log on. We may look for whenever someone's password is continually being entered incorrectly. So if this happens once or twice, then it might just be the person who forgot their password, or it was a typo and they didn't get their password correct. But if this happens often, let's say 10 or 100 or 1,000 times a second, we can clearly see, hey, this is automated, and it might actually be someone trying to guess this person's password. And that is what we call an indicator of compromise, where we use data to identify when an attack happens. So then we can actually respond to it. Other examples of indicators of compromise may be a rise in network traffic. So if we suddenly see a lot more going on our website or on something else that faces the internet, then we might also want to look at that, because that may indicate that someone is trying to attack. Or another thing is, if we, for example, see that Jill from HR is trying to log on from Melbourne, but this morning we actually captured that she entered our building in Brisbane with her fingerprint. So how can Jill be both in Brisbane and in Melbourne? And that is an indicator of compromise, where we think, you know what, actually Jill might be in this building, but someone else is trying to use her username and password to log on to the systems in Melbourne. So those are indicators of compromise, and that's typically what an attack looks like to a cybersecurity professional. Okay, so let's look at some data breaches that have occurred in the past. So how often do data breaches occur? If you look at this visualization, this is an extract of data breaches that have occurred over the last few years, as you can see, and it only includes data breaches where more than 30,000 records or occurrences of sensitive information have been breached. Now, a data breach is when an organization experiences a cyber attack, and sensitive information that they are in charge of gets leaked and is no longer within their control and is no longer confidential. Excuse me. So maybe a few examples of this. Sorry about that. A few examples of these breaches. So in April this year, Nintendo suffered a breach where 300,000 of the accounts, Nintendo Switch accounts, were actually breached. Now this, if you have a Nintendo Switch account, you may have received notification from Nintendo that asked you to reset your password because those accounts were actually breached. In February this year, Marriott, they breached 5.2 million of their customer records. So 5.2 million of their hotel guests' information were accessed by an unauthorized party by using, I guess, 2 existing employee accounts. So 5.2 million of their customer records were available on the internet. And in March 2018, Facebook failed to adequately secure some of their systems. And this allowed an external party known as Cambridge Analytica to access a lot more information than they were meant to access. So as you can see there, to the tune of 50 million records were accessed in the specific one that I'm referring to. Now, as a result of that breach, through Cambridge Analytica, Facebook were made to pay more than $5 billion in fines, which is obviously a staggering amount of money to pay. So yeah, the prevalence of data breaches certainly out there, and it does happen fairly often. Okay, so let's look at ransomware. Now, ransomware is when a computer, an attacker gains access to a computer and then locks the owner of the computer out, and then charges money in order to restore the access to the computer. So this has happened, it actually happens more and more often, and this is one of the main cyber threats that we defend against today. The example that you see on the screen on the left there is an example of a message that pops up. So this was in a 2017 attack known as WannaCry, where, and this was a global event where many organizations across the world were affected by the attack. And essentially, you would be working away at your computer and suddenly this message would pop up, and then that would mean that you were successfully attacked, and then the attackers demanded a large sum of money in order to restore access to the computer. As I mentioned, it's one of the major threats that we face as organizations. And on the right there, you'll see a few relatively recent examples of ransomware attacks, where there were 2 cities in the States that were attacked, where the ransomware demand was around $52,000 and $76,000. But the most critically, the 2 organizations were actually offline for 3 or 4 weeks. And for any company to be, or any organization to be offline for that long costs them a staggering amount of money. As you can see, both of those breaches cost $17 and $18 million respectively. Actually, on average, most recently, a recent study has shown that the average ransomware payment that's demanded these days is around about $111,000. So that's a large amount of money that's demanded by attackers. But as you can see there in that table on the right, the cost of a ransomware breach or ransomware incident typically is in the millions. So that really makes organizations think, and that's why these sorts of attacks are so successful, because attackers typically are able to collect the money and then run. Okay, so lastly, I'd like to just take a brief look at what the cybersecurity team looks like. So when we defend against these threats, there are various members of a team that are critical, and there are others. I'm only going to touch on a few of them today. But firstly, you would have your security operations center or your SOC analyst. Now that was the person sitting in front of all the screens, and it really does look like this in a SOC, where you have various monitors that you work off. There are typically dozens of monitors still around the room as well that you monitor at various times of the day, all with the idea of looking at the right data at the right time to understand when a cyber attack occurs. This is a great place to really start out in cybersecurity, as you understand cyber attacks really well when you've worked in a cyber security operations center. Cyber forensics or incident response analysts, they're also critical to the team, and they're not always retained in organizations, but often brought in as consultants. But they're really critical to prepare and to respond to cyber incidents or attacks when they occur. So if an organization realizes that they're under attack, in terms from either they've been breached, the data has been breached, or they're under ransomware attack, they bring in a cyber forensics and incident response analysts to help them respond to the incident and to minimize and contain the damage. Penetration tester or ethical hackers. Now, so at Youi, we have a few of these in our team, and it really is useful to have someone who thinks like an attacker in the team, so to continually test your systems. So as I mentioned before, we only really defend effectively when we fully understand our adversaries or the cyber threats. And having some of these skills in the organization really helps to apply what we call offensive security, to think like an attacker and therefore be one step ahead with your defense. And the day-to-day for a pen tester or an ethical hacker is really to be pointed in a different direction and say, well, please go hack that for us today to see if you can get in, or try and hack that, and then for us to gradually improve our defenses as we go. Security architect, very critical role. And this person essentially designs the components of our security systems. Depending on the size of the organization, whether it's a 2-person business or a 10,000 person organization, it's really important that the right security components or controls are designed and defined and implemented. And the security architect is typically responsible for that. Last but not least, the cybersecurity engineer. So the security architect typically designs all the components, but then the cybersecurity engineer uses technology platforms to actually bring those capabilities to life and to operate the capabilities in our environment. So these are just a few of the cybersecurity team members that we may find. Okay, so that was me, very sweet and short, and yeah, I'm open to any questions.
Yeah, no, we've got a fair few questions. I think cybersecurity is something that interests a lot of the attendees. I guess we'll start with the first question first. We hear certain parts of the world, or I guess like certain nations, are more prone to having hackers, and more cyber attacks come from certain parts of the world. Is that necessarily true?
Sure, no, I wouldn't say that is true. We certainly see on a daily basis attacks from all over the world. And while I think some of those attackers are in the news more often because of the geopolitical environment that we live in, they may be accentuated more. But yeah, we do see there's hardly a country we don't see attack from. Although I might add that it's not as straightforward to attribute cyber attacks to a specific group or a specific country, because there are ways to hide your identity in that way. So unless you spend real effort, often that is misleading information as well. But no, it's not fully true.
Yeah, okay, that's really interesting. Another thing that we hear about in the media a little bit, I guess, is the dark web or the deep web. Does that have a large part to play to do with hacking?
Yes, that certainly does. So, so the deep web essentially is a version of the internet that is not detected or searchable by a search engine. So you won't find any deep websites on Google. And then the dark web are not accessible at all unless you have very specific and special, I guess, equipment and software on your machine. And the reason why I say yes, it does play a role within, I guess, the cyber realm is often deep web or dark web forums can be relatively anonymous. So unless you again know really, you really know what you do, like potentially the FBI or any other AFP or federal police may do, it's really hard to find out who someone is in a forum on the dark web. And therefore, whenever maybe there's a breach or there's a set of information that is up for sale, and that'll happen on the dark web because it's very difficult to trace someone's identity. But it is not impossible, and it certainly happens again more and more often that people and cybercrime organizations are often flipped because of their inability to secure themselves on even the dark web.
Okay, well that sounds pretty fascinating, I guess. Another question we've got in relation to hacking is which network services or which ports are like the most targeted in attacks?
Yeah, that's interesting. So this is a relatively technical question. I like it. So the ports are port 80 and 443. Those network services are HTTP and HTTPS services. And the reason why I say that is for everyone's benefit is those are the ports or the services that web applications or websites are accessed across. And so typically the most attacked thing in an organization is whatever you expose, what websites you expose to the internet. So for a bank, it would be their internet banking sites. For an insurer, it would be our customer and client portals. Those are the things that attackers are really after, because that's where they can access the sensitive information through, and that's where they can really get to potentially committing fraud online as well.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, having the web, the front end of an organization being attacked. Moving forward, I guess, a bit about yourself. I think some of the students want to know a bit more about you. What is your educational background and how did you first get involved with cybersecurity?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So yeah, I have a bachelor's in science, a BSc IT, information technology that I studied, and I then went to work for KPMG as first as an IT advisory consultant post my studies. Where I also furthered my studies into, I guess, more specialist fields. So where I first became certified as a certified information systems auditor, and then moved into the cyber fields where I was certified as a certified ethical hacker, and then just, I guess, a large number of specialist cybersecurity certifications. I did start out as I guess, a BSc IT student. I don't see that as the only road into cybersecurity. I would just say that if you really have a passion for cybersecurity, that's when you'll be successful. in this line of work. I've seen people in the past who've studied politics, for example, a political science degree, and then moved into cyber, and they were highly successful just because they positioned themselves and they really knew what they were letting themselves get into.
That's pretty good advice, I'd say. And we've got time for one more question. Have you personally ever dealt with ransom negotiations or been involved in a ransomware attack?
No, luckily not. So ransomware attack, once a friend of mine, a mate of mine's personal computer was once ransomware, so I helped them out of that one. But no, not as part of an organization, not in a ransomware attack. Other cyber incidents, yes, many.
That's very reassuring to hear. Thanks for your time, Heinrich.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Youi.
Just like to thank Heinrich again for presenting your experience to everyone here at the virtual Big Day in Queensland, and also like to thank everybody who submitted all our questions. It was great to see everybody really involved and engaged in Heinrich's presentation. If you submitted a question but it wasn't answered, don't worry. We will put together a questions and answers document on the website with Heinrich's responses. These questions and answers will be uploaded to www.thebigdayin.com.au shortly. Our next presenter for today is Shazin Sohani from Westpac. She actively mentors new graduates from UNSW and Macquarie University, focusing on the culture of engagement and entrance into the cybersecurity and counter-terrorism intelligence field. She's highly passionate about delivering exceptional security outcomes for business and mentoring young women in security, sharing her knowledge and learning opportunities. Shazin has an active presence in Australia and globally, assisting and mentoring graduates who currently work in GRC and threat intelligence roles, and has acted as an advisory to various government departments. In the past 2 years, she has played a major role in the strong shift in awareness and acceptance of cyber resilience, compliance, and prevention in Kenya. So please join me in welcoming our next presenter for today, Shazin Sohani from Wespac Group, with her presentation, Cybersecurity, Career Pathways.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Shazin Sohani. As was previously said, I have been in the cybersecurity world for quite a number of years, predominantly in the governance, cybercrime and risk management sectors. So I would like to start my presentation today on cybersecurity pathways. As you heard in the previous presentation, obviously cybersecurity is a very broad industry that also involves, a lot of technical, functional, and non-functional abilities. So I'll go through today's agenda. So in the start, I will introduce myself. I will introduce what the presentation's about. I'll then follow on to where to start thinking about your career within cybersecurity, where to start in terms of education, job titles, forum groups. I will go through some high-level cybersecurity domains and then move on to examples of job titles that you could get into. I'll also touch briefly on skills for cybersecurity careers. That includes soft skills, technical skills. I'll provide some examples of tools and technologies involved. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll go through a number of questions. So let's start with a bit of an introduction. So I'll introduce myself a bit. I was born and brought up in Kenya. I started my career off high school as a medical student. After a year of being in a medical school, I decided health and science was not my thing. And I wanted to get into a career that was brain challenging and that actually allowed me to learn and grow as the industry grew. So I then moved into studying a bachelor's in computer science and specializing into information security. I then moved into doing my master's in business and ERP systems. As the previous presenter mentioned, that being in cybersecurity is not particularly just IT skills or a focus within IT. other degrees and sectors do benefit being in this industry. So I then moved into my first role at Deloitte as a graduate data analyst. I worked on churning a lot of data, producing insights, dashboards, a lot of learning across that way. That's the area where I actually learned a bit more around programming and the key IT skills that are required to move on in your career. From then, I obviously then moved into the cybersecurity world, specialized in areas of cybersecurity, gained advanced training around cybersecurity, cybercrime, counterterrorism, as well as around the non-functional requirements, which were risk management, governance, and as well as auditing. Now, in the previous presentation, we obviously had an overview of what cybersecurity is, what are the types of attacks we go through. I wanted to have a quick look about the targets within the company. Now, in the recent years, we've seen a lot of changes in the IT environment, a lot of changes within companies, a bit more IT complex environments where we have not just one company, but multiple companies. Companies with large amounts of data. Banking industries are main targets, government sectors are the other targets, social media platforms are one target. So the reason why we've got a lot more demand now into cybersecurity is because of these key targets. Hackers, criminals, they use this information for various other purposes. It could include, funding organized crimes, just hacking into for the fun of it, stalking someone on social media, as well as getting people's financial details. The one thing that's recently come up is a lot of energy sectors. The energy sector, the telecommunication sector has been a recent target. With our human behavior changing, using a lot more of our technology, our phones to purchase products online, our phones to do our online banking. The telecommunications departments or these sectors actually face a lot more breaches and incidents on a daily basis. In Australia, an average, a telecommunication industry would face, a near miss or an incident every few minutes. So that is fairly large. And this is why companies now invest a lot into cybersecurity. They want to invest a lot into jobs, and they want to invest a lot into graduate programs. They want to bring more people in. So we'll move on to the next one, where it's where to start. Obviously, when you're starting your career, it's a blank canvas. You don't know where to start from. There's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of information in there. But the key vision to have is, what would you like to achieve at the end of the line? Do you want to be in a more technical space? Do you want to be more in a management space? Do you want to work for a big company? Do you want to work for a small company? These all need to be taken into consideration as part of your career goals. So where we need to start is, the first one is earning a bachelor's degree or equivalent. As I previously mentioned, you could have a bachelor's degree in computer science, you could have a bachelor's degree in business, you could have a bachelor's degree in e-commerce. Having a bachelor's degree is your first foundational stone, and that would actually help you get into the corporate world. Ensure that when you're doing your bachelor's degree, not only is it an accredited university, but your coursework, your tutorials, your practicals align to your career goals and give you the information or the skill sets that you require to progress further. Next one we'll actually look at is reading on cybersecurity articles. Keep up to date with the regular articles, the regular news that's happening around data breaches. Recently, Australia's come up in the news quite a bit, in terms of investing into cybersecurity. Women in cybersecurity have come up a lot in networking groups. There's a lot of international conversations happening between Australia and other countries as to how we could improve the collaboration, how we could improve the cybersecurity environment. So reading on these articles will not only keep you up to date with what's happening, but it will also help you advance the skills. Next one is actually joining professional groups. I have emphasized previously that this is a very key area to look into. Join professional groups as early as possible, even if you're in your first year of education, if you're in your final year of studies. Ensure that you have that ongoing support within professional groups, so that gives you kind of an idea of what the corporate world looks like, what options are there, what kind of skill sets they're looking for. The next one I wanted to talk about was volunteering and internship. A lot of companies these days offer volunteering to university students, offer internships to graduates. This is one thing that I do suggest that students take up on, and work with various companies in order to get where they want to get. Internships will actually give you the real life experience and also help you understand what the real world looks like. The next one I wanted to talk about was completing advanced trainings. These days, you don't have to wait to complete a bachelor's degree or complete your education in order to get an advanced training. There's a lot of online portals, things like U Academy, Cybery, where you can actually join in and go through those courses. That not only will give you an upper hand, but it will also give you additional knowledge and additional skills that you would need in order to move. I know of previous students that I used to mentor, actually was in the more technical space. Coming into the advanced training, they then realized that they didn't want to do all this because it was just sitting behind a desk the whole time in front of a TV. They wanted to interact with people. And this point is where thoughts would change, your career path would change. So I strongly suggest you start advanced learning at a very early stage, and that would help you shape your career in a better way. Lastly, what I wanted to talk about is regular mentoring and professional guidance. This is very key to your career journey. You need to ensure that you have regular guidance and regular mentoring throughout your journey. As I mentioned before, the cybersecurity industry is very vast. There's a lot of information there. There's a lot of niche requirements in there as well. So the professional guidance and mentoring will help you not only shape your career, but also guide you to the right path. What I next want to talk about is more around the security domains. So we do have a lot of security domains. I've broken it down here into 3 different areas. So you have your information, data security, you've got your technology, and you've got your strategic. Now, information data security is a very broad domain. This basically focuses on protecting your actual data assets. It can range from having relevant governance and risk management processes in place to intellectual property, defining what is important for the company, business and financial integrity, regulatory compliance, industry espionage, privacy, and forensics. We then move into the technology, which is more specific and focuses on technology and the solutions. For this, it's more IT specific requirements that need to be put in place. In this domain, we look at things like firewalls, intrusion detections, network security, to even details of various viruses, crimeware, as well as the incident response. You need to be able to have programming skills, IT skills, in order to develop further within this domain. We then move on to the more strategic side of things, which focuses on the critical security problems. This can range from, nation-state interests to professional alliances to tactic, strategic intelligence, as well as geopolitics. Now, these three combined will give you the overall security domain that you need. And within these domains, you've got different titles, you've got different job prospects, and it really depends on what you're passionate about and what you want to do going forward. So I just wanted to go through a couple of job titles for you all. Previously, the previous presenter touched on a few of the titles, so I won't go through details of it. But the first one's around security engineers. So security engineers are responsible to build IT security systems and ensure relevant measures are put in place. The next one you've got is security specialists or analysts. They plan and execute flawless security measures. You then move on to security consultants. Security consultants provide advice and implement security solutions. Not only do they focus on security, but they bridge the gap between business and IT functions as well, being able to present these security solutions to the business, to the senior stakeholders. Then you've got the cryptographers who ensure codes and encryption algorithms cannot be broken into. They're deciphered in a correct manner. The encryption keys, the algorithms are stored in a correct manner. The next one we'll move on to is security administrators. So these keep the security systems running smoothly. They check very detailed technology requirements, and then they ensure that the systems cannot be hacked into at any point. We then move into incident responders. Incident responders respond to incidents, breaches, attacks, possible attacks that are happening. These range, into various other job titles, whether it's the red team or the blue team, or whether it's actual investigators itself. Then move on to vulnerability assessors. So these actually spot system vulnerabilities and create solutions to ensure that the system applications are not hacked into. This role is very important for companies because a lot of applications, a lot of systems are exposed to vulnerabilities on a daily basis. The next one we'll move on to is security software developers. These developers design software and applications, and they ensure that the key security controls or the key security requirements are put in place. We then move on to security architects. The architects design and maintain security solutions. They ensure that these security solutions are not only robust, but also are hack-free. The next one is security managers. So we have an overall role where security managers keep the environment secure with the help of expert teams. We then move on to security directors. Security directors make decisions and solve complex issues around cybersecurity. The last one we'll talk about is security auditors. So auditors ensure that applications and systems at that point in time are compliant, and we do not have any weaknesses or issues within those systems. We'll now move on to skills within cybersecurity. Generally, skills within cybersecurity is very IT targeted. However, soft skills do come into play. So we'll start off with communication skills. Verbal and writing skills is very important within the cybersecurity environment. You need to ensure you can not only communicate these findings or solutions around it, but also be able to document it in a way that the business can understand. The next one is adaptability. You need to adapt to environments. The next one is teamwork. You need to have the skill to work within the team. Integrity and discretion. Cybersecurity is a very sensitive area that requires integrity and discretion at every point. You then move on to problem-solving skills. You need to ensure that you have relevant problem-solving skills and you have the ability to solve problems within a quicker time. Next one is critical thinking. This skill is very important within cybersecurity because you do need to come up with solutions and ways to resolve issues within a short amount of time. And last but not least is thinking outside the box. Every incident, every breach, every near miss is different from the previous one. Hackers, attackers are educating themselves on a daily basis, and therefore we need to ensure that we have the ability to think outside the box and bring those skill sets to the table and to the team. We'll then move on to specific IT skills that are required. So first skill set, security skills across various platforms. We have different platforms, not only internal, hosted solutions, but we also now deal with cloud solutions. We need to ensure that we have the exact skill sets to sit within those various platforms. Your next one is risk analysis, the ability to analyze the risk and the impact it's going to have to businesses. We then move on to key programming skills. You need to ensure that key programming skills are in place and that you have the basic knowledge of how codes are written, how they're run, and what is the impact should they be a malicious attack. The next one is around network protocols. Ensure that we have key knowledge around the foundational areas of networking and the key areas of protocols as well. Your next one we move on to is understanding of vulnerabilities. You need to understand key vulnerabilities and ensure that you're up to date with the latest viruses that are in place. Next one is technical aptitude. You need to have a decent foundational technical knowledge. Last but not least, intruder techniques. You need to think like the attacker. You need to think like the hacker in order to beat them to it. Last but not least, the main skill that ties all this together is the ability to learn. You need to have the ability to learn on a daily basis because this will be an ongoing thing. Next, I'm going to quickly brief through various tools and technologies within cybersecurity. The first area is around asset management. There are a lot of tools out there that will help you with asset management. Assets range from hardware to actual data. The next one is your cloud-based security. A lot of cloud-based security is in place. You've got a lot of cloud platforms in place. You've got AWS, you've got Google. There are various technologies in there to help protect that environment. Your next is your various encryption tools. Then have endpoint protection. You need to protect the endpoints of your application. You need to ensure that we do not have any unauthorized access into the systems and application. Next one is intrusion protection. You need to ensure that you've got tools in place to help you prevent any kind of intrusion. Malware and virus security. There are a lot of tools out there, a lot of open source tools that would help you detect malware and virus within your environment. You've got your network security monitoring tools. You've got your firewall tools. Your next one's your penetration testing tools. There are a lot of Linux softwares out there. There's a lot of open source softwares out there that will help you with your penetration testing. Your next one is around managed detection. And after that is PK services, which is your private key, public key. Last one is around wireless security. Wireless security is important because that is something that everybody uses these days. There are various tools out there to help you monitor and ensure that it is secure. Now, I do want to talk something about the future. So, cybersecurity is an evolving industry. There are new areas coming up every single day. Globally, there are over 3 million unfilled jobs within cybersecurity. By 2025, Australia will have at least 15,000 unfilled jobs within cybersecurity. And that's why we push for people to join the cybersecurity field. Not only is it exciting, not only is it something that you will learn on a daily basis, but it is a demanding industry, especially for women. Australia holds at least 20 to 30% of women within cybersecurity. And there is a push in the industry to bring women on board into this technical space, to bring women on board into cybersecurity. So my advice to you all, join cybersecurity, get your friends to join as well. It is an exciting journey. It is a very fun trip. If you ask anyone in cybersecurity, they will tell you the same thing. Last but not least, but I wanted to give you a few reads to go through. There is a link which we will send out later in through the chat box. I do like this dashboard because it is very live, it is dynamic. This dashboard will actually give you details on the world's biggest data breaches and hacks. So please do go for the site, have a read through the details, have a read through, the various companies and industries that are affected. Next, I wanted to talk about a couple of books I've started reading recently, which is called Hacker I Am by Craig Ford. Short stories, very simple to read, very exciting and very interesting. So I do suggest they are available at Amazon. They're available in ebook versions. Please go ahead, have a look and read it. We'll finally move on to questions.
Yep. We have a little bit of time for questions. So I guess one of the first questions I'm just going to quickly ask you is, what would your suggestions be for finding mentors or career, like people to help you guide in your career?
So the best way to get a mentor on board or to look for that is to go through professional groups. So there are a lot of groups in LinkedIn. There are a lot of groups that are advertised by universities that you could get into. You could individually reach out to a professional, via LinkedIn or in a conversation via school to just kind of kick off that conversation and guide you through it.
Sounds like some good pathways to take there. Talking about pathways into cybersecurity, I know you mentioned university a lot as an ideal pathway to get into cybersecurity, but would TAFE also be a good option for some students if they're interested?
Yes, so recently TAFE has started introducing courses around cybersecurity, intelligence and policing as well. So yes, that would be the way to go.
Perfect. And we've got time for one final question. To become an ethical hacker, what kind of way could you practice and develop those skills? Because obviously you can't be hacking all the time.
Yes. Like from personal experience, I would say the best way to get into that is join conferences and hackathons that happen on a regular basis. There are a lot of them that happen these days. I've had some that happen on a weekly basis. Join that. The conferences happening around. Join the conferences. That will give you a bit of an idea to go through, your hacking journey. I'd suggest, not going through any dodgy sites on Google and stuff, just to get the hackathons, because that's a way some of the hackers get into. So I strongly suggest not going through any of those, but go through professional hackathon conferences and presentations as well.
Very sound advice, I'm assuming. Thanks, Shazin, for giving us a glimpse into your experiences and your industry knowledge.
Thank you.
Shazin is an amazing role model for anyone who actually has an interest in cybersecurity. As with Heinrich, she will aim to answer all unanswered questions, and they will be posted on our website later. Also, don't forget to check out the ACS Foundation's Career Wheel. The link should be on your screen now. Visit www.careersfoundation.com.au to view the Career Wheel. We'd also like to thank all our sponsors who've made the virtual Big Day possible, along with our presenters today, Heinrich and Shazin. We hope you've learnt a lot about the future and the potential of the tech industry, whether it be in creative, development, security, or business fields, after tuning into our weekly virtual Big Day in Queensland series. This is the final episode for the virtual Big Day in Queensland series, but if you want to re-watch this or any of our other presentations, they'll all be available on our website at www.thebigdayin.com.au. Just hit the past events tab. Even though times are tough right now, keep working towards the STEM career that you want, and opportunities will open themselves up as you keep pursuing. The ICT industry is only going to become more lucrative and better as time goes on. Keep safe, and we hope to see you at a big day in either online or at a university near you in 2021. Thank you.